Whoa,
Mr. Shaver, how are you?
there you are. I haven't seen you in a hot minute.
It has been a little while, and we missed you. We missed you last week, so good to have you on.
I've been busy renewing my commercial pilot's license.
Oh wow, yeah, commercial pilot too. Do you commercial pilot very much?
I don't, but it's so it's always an aspiration. I do occasionally. I'll fly second seat in commercial planes that need a second pilot.
You say that so nonchalantly. Every once in a while, I roll Honduran cigars down
Ooh, that's not a thing I've done before, but
or
yeah.
whatever. You never cease to amaze me.
I spend other people's money on airplanes.
That's just fantastic. Well, what are we talking about today?
I think today we're going to talk about OWASP.
OWASP. Okay.
It's interesting to me because they haven't updated OWASP since 2017, and they put out, like any good cybersecurity person, I love reading the draft policies and documentation that our governing organizations release. And we can talk a little bit about the one that came out from Office of Management and Budget this week too. But
that'll be up next. That'll be good.
But yeah, we're gonna talk about what their new top 10 is and what to do about it.
Okay, let's do that thing.
Okay.
Short intro.
That was a very short one this time.
Yeah, and short lead-in today too. So, okay, OWASP top 10 revised for previously in 2017. Not officially revised yet. I think we're talking about we're talking about the draft at this point.
But they've kind of sort of published it like it is sort of official.
Right. It's like we're reserving the right. If somebody points out something really crazy, we're reserving the right to make some changes.
So it's like pretty much published. I think unless they get enough criticism that we change something, you can just use it. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So I gotta admit, like I don't feel like this is one of my strong suits. Like,
oh really?
Web application security.
Yeah. I
think this is probably more, you're more of the subject matter.
Well, that scares me a little bit because I was about to say this is my weakest area, and application security might be a little more your jam. So it might be the blind. It might be the really bad idea. It might be the blind leading the blind today. But
it could be, but
that's never stopped us before.
No. And maybe that's useful. I'm not sure everyone else out there, we're not the only ones that aren't experts at this, but
yeah,
I still feel like, we work with a lot of, smaller security shops in our history, and feel like this is a gap they have too.
Well, and by the way, if I think about our target audience, I have in my career known very, very few true rock star application security people, which is to say, and that's no disrespect to anybody in my network. Is
that because they're not out there, or
because I think they're not out there?
Or is it just that personality type is unknowable?
I think it's possible to be that thing. I think it's my belief is that it's in very rarefied air, and I think and we'll get into a little bit what OWASP is or what we the blind think that OWASP is, but I think the issue is that the security discipline is full of infrastructure folks that have done security. I think there's another set of folks who are more like governance, process, management, that do the GRC kinds of things, and there are certainly some other types of folks. But this application to really know the nitty gritty of how software is written, and to be a security leader on top of that.
Yeah.
And you start with somebody who's really a high-level coder, a leader of software development, essentially, and then to be a leader of software development security. Again, I think the people exist, but
right.
there just aren't a ton of them.
Well,
out there.
And there's so much variability in it for me. I know, I feel really confident in infrastructure and network security.
Yeah.
But there becomes, I had to go through these phases where I knew networking well enough to make it work well.
Yeah.
And then know how to break it.
Right.
And then use that knowledge about how to break it to improve its security. And I would say I'm more in the first bucket in applications, that I know enough about it to be like, look at this cool thing that I did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have mastery of it. And there's so many different programming languages.
Yeah.
And ways to deploy applications
and some of those ways are even fairly secure, I think.
I don't know. Sometimes, I do a fair amount of Python code, and fortunately, I'm not a coder for really important things. And I can be like, that worked. Not exactly sure why, but it did, and we're going to go with it. And I think there are more people out there like me that write software than are that it worked, and I know exactly why, and I know the different ways that you can break it, and I know how to secure it.
Yeah, the joke, or maybe cliche I've seen, is if you took Google away from 90% of programmers, they'd be hosed.
Yep.
So okay,
let's
jibber jabber. You tell me about OWASP.
I'm gonna tell you what I think about some of this stuff.
Sounds great.
So let me share. And hopefully I don't break anything. Can you see this guy?
Yeah, I'm bringing it up. So this is the 2017.
Yeah, because we don't have this version of the 2021 out yet. I just kind of wanted to show folks what this is all about as we go into it, and what it used to be and what it's going to be now. But you can see they published some pretty nice guidance about really web application security, and we're going to look at what the top 10 most critical security risks are. And they've changed substantively, and they haven't published, or I haven't been able to find this downloadable guide. So we've been reviewing, kind of what they've published in draft form on their website. And there's this nice little matrix right here that looks at what was in 2017 and what's in 2021, what's gone up, what's gone down.
Yeah.
And some of these make a lot of sense to me of what's new. And if I think to our ransomware lifecycle that we were talking about before, I think a lot of these line up with that. So let's kind of maybe walk through what they are, and then we can dig into a little bit of detail, and maybe we can do some follow-up sessions on these if this is...
Yeah, that sounds great.
This is important. So the first one that's new, not new, but has moved up, is broken access controls. So it moves up from 5th position up to 1st position. And their claim is that 94% of the applications that were tested had some form of broken access control. And that's pretty startling to me. And that's kind of like that you can use maybe an API key that's generated just for your specific tenant or user account actually is providing you access to all kinds of other data. Maybe it's as simple as just frogging with the URL that you're browsing to, and that's allowing you beyond, some particular front door that you need to authenticate to. There's a variety of different things mapped to that we can dig into a little bit later. But that's kind of startling to me, because that feels like a thing that would just be basic blocking and tackling of publishing a web app.
And it's interesting you said that, because stuff that's easy to say by me as a non-programmer, but that seems to be a theme. As I looked at the 2017, this cross-mapping graphic, which was the really eyeball-catching thing for me and all of that, looked at the detail, but spent the most time looking at that. It seems like, that the new OWASP top 10 is going a little old school. Like, some of the stuff feels really blocky and tackly. It's not super sophisticated.
That's what the ransomware thing felt like to me. Like,
right.
Super blocky, tackly.
Yeah.
Which is good. I'm a huge proponent of that, but that's kind of not the message we hear about security in the tech industry. That's all about like new hotness of some AI tool that's going to take away all your woes. But if we take the theme from the ransomware lifecycle and this, it seems very much that like the industry bodies are more like, no, let's get back to some blocking and tackling.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
So the second one, cryptographic failures, moves up to number 2. One, I was a little surprised at, although I can agree with it. Number 2, absolutely. I, do lots of, network telemetry, and have seen over many years and recently how many known compromised or weak cryptography sets people use. And I don't see cryptography necessarily as like always an application security thing. A lot of times it is in the application, but most of the time it's supported by underlying protocols. And that's an area I do feel really comfortable with. And I wonder if that's why there's so many cryptographic failures. People just don't understand it. It's more of a binary, like on or off kind of thing. Like, we turned on encryption. And, there's so many different, methodologies inside of cryptography.
Yeah.
That I wonder if people get kind of confused about that.
Well, and then I think you come out of the infrastructure world where, like, I think about cryptography related to an infrastructure area like backups, where it's like, I have this backup solution, and here are the 4 crypto modules that we support. Do you want AES backups, and what level? It's kind of really predefined. Whereas I think in application security, where it's, the universe is open to you, what modules do you go use, and there's all this opportunity to implement those poorly, pick the wrong thing.
Yeah.
My goodness, go ahead and write your own crypto, maybe, which always.
Well, and to be clear, some is better than none.
Yeah, right.
But I do think it is, like, in the minds of many, a binary thing.
Yeah.
Of like, got that. We got, encryption turned on. We're good to go. And some of it's so weak now. It's not quite that simple. But that's number 2. Number 3, so injection, cross-site scripting slides down here. They have the same 94% that were tested. So that's interesting to me. Do you think they're trying to say that 94% were vulnerable to injection, or that they tested 94% of the applications?
Yeah. Again, I'm kind of wondering the same thing in the background, and I don't really know. I do, I think injection has been on here almost as long as it's been around, and has been.
It's always gonna be.
And it's always been, and like you talk about, you've got some at least modern development experience. Some of my last development was writing like ASP applications.
Yeah, but you got some pretty wicked SQL skills, man.
Yeah, well, that's from 20 years ago. And the dirty little secret is I shudder to think about some of the VB script I had, connecting back to Access databases and SQL databases where, I guarantee you that stuff, if hopefully none of it I've ever written is still around, because absolutely, I don't know that I really understood input validation and preventing, SQL and other kinds of injections. So, yeah, I think there's just a lot out there of, here's a database. How can we search a thing? And people just throw that up on a web app somewhere, and all done, and there it sits for years.
So, number 4.
This was the really fascinating one to me. Like, really feels old school and feels good, warms the heart of an infrastructure guy.
It really does warm my heart. And why it's a new category, I don't know, because I feel like secure design should be part of it. But I know that in my experience, there's not a lot of threat modeling done or reference architectures for designing software that are formally adopted inside organizations. And
and having worked in a very DevOpsy organization, didn't write software there, but I lived in the culture of an online company doing DevOps culture. And this one was really interesting to me because this couple of words, reference architecture, feels like it was maybe a bad word. That if you said something like reference architecture in a modern DevOps shop, that people would say, well, that's kind of old school waterfall thinking. We don't have reference architectures, we're agile.
Which sometimes becomes like industry buzz for we make it up as we go.
Right, correct. Or is, I could be reading too much into it, but that seemed to be the heart of why insecure design would pop on this list of, maybe everything doesn't have to be monolithic and plan in a waterfall kind of fashion, but at least there should be
some design principles.
Design principles of how do we accomplish security, underlying these applications. What's our overall approach to it?
Yeah. Okay, number 5 is security misconfiguration. And I'm going to research it a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure the difference between misconfiguration and insecure design.
Right.
Like they would be pretty well linked to each other. But I guess maybe it could be that you have a secure design, but somehow it got configured incorrectly. And I know security misconfiguration is, becoming a more relevant topic. I was having some conversations a little while ago, looking for how does an organization manage a security configuration? Because a lot of times, if I think from the infrastructure world, I'm going to deploy a server and I'm going to configure its registry settings and its host firewall on it. And I'm going to do that one time. And then I'm just going to trust that configuration works. And then you kind of have like firewall rot of rules that get changed and all this stuff. And there's becoming like a whole new class of tools out there for software, for cloud infrastructure, for non-cloud infrastructure. It's literally just about security configuration monitoring. So not even just like logging and alerting on activities that are happening, but identifying controls and then telling when they're misconfigured and then alerting somebody to go respond to it or actually responding.
And I think here in security misconfiguration, like here, maybe the difference between, like here I think about, you have components that are part of your application that have default creds still there. Like I think the design could be fine, but then, in terms of configuration, you still have admin as a
Yeah,
password,
true. Good point. Yeah.
or that sort of thing. But a lot of
Well,
that, or like you said,
I have an interesting one I've been thinking about a little bit on this. So to your point about like default creds, I was talking to a customer a little while ago, and they had. I asked them about multi-factor authentication. They were like, "Yep, we got it. We have it implemented everywhere." And then we did some network telemetry, host telemetry work. And I was like, how many domains do you think you have on your network? And they were like 2, maybe 3. It's like, what if I told you that you had 38 domains? And how do people, like, how do you handle, like, kind of your point about having valid credentials when you have all these different credential domains that people aren't even aware of?
right.
So I think that could fall under there as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that one too includes, you and I have talked about like CIS hardening.
Yeah.
That to me potentially is a misconfiguration. Like
I
people
think
think,
so.
people think of hardening as this additional set of steps, but I think the concept here is like, no, especially with web apps, like you should be hardened. And so to be using default configuration is security misconfiguration, basically. Like,
Yeah, but sys hardening is not easy either,
right,
especially, if you're running it, I know if you're going to take a new Ubuntu image, like that's default, and harden it to sys level 1 or level 2, it's a lot of work.
right.
Like a lot of work.
Coming out of the gate, if you do that, all of your web apps will stop working probably.
Right, and then you have to tune like which sys controls broke your web app and should they have broke it and all that kind of stuff. So maybe people are just like, that's a really good thing to do tomorrow.
I'm going to add that to the backlog.
To the tomorrow list.
Yeah, on our Scrum.
I can see that because you're always like prioritizing like a new feature release or something. So
yeah, things that make money typically. Yeah.
Okay, number 6, vulnerable and outdated components. I am a vulnerable and outdated component. I really relate to this one. So it was number 2 in an industry survey. Moves up from number 9. I see this a lot. As far as just folks just not replacing, whether it's an infrastructure component, a kernel package in an operating system, or just very, very vulnerable code bases that we use, runtime components,
like libraries that people use. Here's some image processing library.
I'm pretty sure we still use Java and Flash all over the place.
Yeah.
So, but there's such a huge investment in some of this. This is like easier said than done.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and this is was the case in Waterfall, and from my perspective, still the case in Agile, of there's a code base that, that somebody created back once upon a time. Often the cliche, not very well documented. And so, we end up with these libraries because it's like, when does the new one even work? Or the updated one, or again, kind of like the CIS hardening, the amount of time and effort that it takes just to get back to the functionality we have today if we update components and libraries.
I think this one's becoming more apparent to me that this is a huge driver for moving to cloud. Whether it's infrastructure components are vulnerable or outdated, like when we do some surveys and our research studies, folks that manage their own infrastructure usually don't have a great answer to vulnerable and outdated components. It's like run it till it breaks kind of thing in a
Yeah.
lot of cases. The customers who run in the cloud, even if it's just IaaS, can kind of be like, well, that's not on us. That's on our cloud provider. And obviously they have a practice for managing that. But as you move up into platform as a service or even microservices, especially if you're just using like, web app functionality, a lot of that gets removed from your plate. And I think that can be it's one of the only viable solutions I see for a lot of organizations.
Yeah. I think, by the way, vulnerable and outdated components, I think conceptually, I think some of the problems with IoT devices that we've talked about here very much living in this world of, that it's not just application security, but it's that widget that we bought or somebody in your organization bought and put on the network. And, and understanding, kind of what embedded Linux version.
Those access cameras that are running Linux too,
right.
on your network are just as much of a threat as that server you may have upgraded to, 2019.
Yeah. It's also where it's in some of this literature, when you scan the internet for things that are still vulnerable to Heartbleed, and it's just absolutely amazing the number of internet connected devices that just still running code that feeds that fails those requirements.
Okay, we have a couple more and we have to go fast because we're close to the time. So identification.
We're getting down to the bottom of the list where the stuff barely even matters anyway. So
right. Identification and authentication failures. So that's come down a ways. Do you think that's because of some of the frameworks and multi-factor authentication that has received a big focus?
I'm not really sure. Increased availability of standard-wide, as they're saying here, increased availability of standardized frameworks seems to be helping. I'd presume that they're talking about that, and not just
like
that, but
OAuth or different things you can just
But also, I think instead of even the availability, here are libraries or frameworks that where. I think about, it's escaping me. There's is it Django? There's like Django framework for Python. There are frameworks for, increasingly that people use, I think, for, how to handle this versus write it myself. And I think the availability of those sorts of frameworks really, really helps, as well as.
I think it's more than just it being a standardized framework. For me, it's the fact that not only is it more secure, but it's just easier to use, Google's OAuth identity on your web app than it is to write your own. And so it's kind of like it's more secure, but also the path of least resistance.
Well, and you get all this, kind of always updated functionality, and even maybe some not just speed up project, but help out with the, log in with Google, log in with Facebook, or log in with GitHub creds, and we could introduce kind of privacy questions around that. But this isn't a privacy framework. This is a security framework, OWASP.
Okay, software and data integrity failures. This is an interesting one about CI/CD pipelines without verifying integrity. And I think that just speaks a lot to the pace of play in development. And it's kind of the we're testing in prod idea. And I think that's honestly still pretty common. I think very mature soft dev organizations have great peer review and data integrity assurance processes, but I think that's pretty uncommon.
Yeah, don't know.
Then security logging and monitoring failures. Yes, all over the board. And I think a lot of folks think they might have logging, and they're like, yeah, we collect logs on that server. We can go look at them.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about here.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and I've lived in this world, being on the SOC side of things in an organization where,
jam.
yeah, so this part of it, when I think about security logging and monitoring failures, like I think about a couple of things come to mind. One is just the sheer lack of consistency. Very often infrastructure components, there's at least some consistency. There's a template for, what does logging look like? There's a standard for, okay, what's the optimum level of turning on logging for a Windows box? What are the log event IDs that I need to?
How much data should I be generating when I'm logging correctly?
And then especially in the app dev, web app dev world, just the, lack of standardization here. And to me, in my experience, logging for security purposes is often not part of the minimum viable product for folks. And so, I found again, but interestingly, my experience of the DevOps Agile school of thought, there's a ton of logging, because it's important for all sorts of reasons. Big one being like monitoring performance. That there's all sorts of verbose logs, but then to get down into the basics of really, really basic things like Aaron Shaver is the person with username A Shaver who logged in to the application at this time and performed this activity. And those basics, more often than not, I have found to not exist.
Yeah, there's no
in custom developed web applications. That it's very often not added at the front of a project as part of the minimum viable product, but added later as, guys like me who run a SOC and are in the middle of investigating an incident say,
hang on, folks, we got to add this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're already out of time, but let's go over the last one real quick. Server-side request forgery. Basically what they're saying here is we added this because the survey told us to, but we don't have any data to support that this is in the top 10 right now.
I love that so much. It's like, all right, you guys said it was important.
So here you go, number 10.
We'll throw you a bone.
So there is your list of the top 9 OWASP threats for 2021. And maybe this one will be with us for another 6 or 7 years. So. Well, man.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hide that.
Well, it was good catching up with you a little bit here.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can chat again next week.
Yeah, we'll keep our streak going. Like those social media apps, like I got to keep my weekly streak.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm not hip and young to know about that. So cool. All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Take care.